to Once Upon a Time, the business analyst storyteller. Hey, there's a story happening already with the muting and everything else. Um, so a few years ago, I became fascinated with. Why does that not want to leave my screen? There we go. I became fascinated with the idea of storytelling, and I've always told stories, but this idea that, as I've done more coaching and mentoring and working with people, and I'll tell people that, I'm not really hearing the story, and I'm not really hearing the requirements told in a way that they can latch onto. And people will read through a document, requirement 80.2.1, the system shall. You know what? No one wants to hear that. No one does. Not only do they not want to hear that, but it's tedious and it's long. It's a pain in the butt, right? I'm hearing a little feedback, Paul, if you can track that down and see who's making a lot of typing noise there. It might be Paul, actually. um, and so I did a lot of research and working, and I talked to some people that are actually authors in storytelling. And I found that actually, good business analysis should always follow this same kind of format and work through it. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to explore this concept of storytelling in business analysis as an analyst and what we need to do. So, what is it about stories? Once upon a time, the business analyst storyteller. It's like opening that book for the very first time. I mean, for those of us that still read paper books, and I'm going to go back, I had not read a good story in a long time. And then I encountered Harry Potter, that very first Harry Potter book. And I don't know how many else of you are in this boat. Chat in if you are, but you remember that first Harry Potter book and how you could not put it down? I mean, it was so addicting. After the first two chapters, you were like, oh no. Yeah, read it in 2 days. A lot of people did. They binge read. And so what's interesting is that if you think about all binge, watching of TV, they were taking it from good series like Harry Potter's and others where we binge read them. Even as a kid, I binge read things like The Chronicles of Narnia, one of my all-time favorite series ever. And that's because these good stories, these good series of stories, have components that work. And there's nothing like a good story when it really works. So when you think of it, and before we really get into it too much here, everyone just give me a quick chat in the chat box. What do you think it is that makes a story compelling? Just curious. We're going to explore this. Drama. Yeah, what makes a story compelling? Relatability. Change. The details. Engaged and entertained. Definitive words, mystery, clear, concise, flow, resonates with the human condition. I love that. Mystery, shock value. I don't know what's going to happen next. Characters, relevance, character conundrum. Characters are interesting, right? We've got another relatability. Thank you, Robert. Same from KM. Great plot, details, conflicts. See, all these things have that. And what they're really trying to say is, I think a lot of it is about the context and how you present it, but it creates some kind of relatability that you can tie to. Regardless, even if it's not your story, you can relate to it. And there needs to be something in it, right? And not every story is for every audience, but there has to be something in it for the audience you intend. So I think of these great stories, and we recognize that they're great because they do these things. And I think the same is true of music, right? Like your best music isn't just about the really cool beat, because we get tired of the beat. What we don't get tired of is the really good lyric that's telling a great story. On a dark desert highway, Cool wind in my hair, all three pieces of it. Warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. And I gave myself goosebumps because I'm like, what's happening next? It was shimmering as the light. What's going to happen next? And it's really, thank you, Mary, very kind. Never sure how that comes across, on webinar, but these things matter. All right. And what I want you guys to do is get some insights into how do I tell stories in requirements as we go through this. Before we go further, though, what's your favorite story? What's your favorite book of all time? I want to know. I'm betting they're all over the place. Pride and Prejudice. Woo! Great story. Treasure Island, Lord of the Rings, To Kill a Mockingbird, Phantom, the new telling of the Phantom of the Opera. Cool. Bookseller of Kabul. That sounds really fascinating, interesting. Gone with the Wind. Da 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 da. North and South Trilogy. Wow, that Gone with the Wind and North and South Trilogy. You guys need to get together. That's a lot. 1984, one of my favorite movies with John Hurt, Atlas Shrugged, The Alchemist, Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure I've read a book that wasn't a child's book in years. I'm the same way. I read a lot of young adult novels because I'm still that age. Um, I remember the first time I tried to read Lord of the Rings, Waterfall Ellis, any Stephen King. See, we're giving each other ideas. I will tell you that I zoned out. I thought it was terrible. Now, keep in mind, I was a little younger, 13, 14, but I just couldn't take it anymore. It was like the dust mote clung to the life end of the hair and finally stripped itself away. And it floated through the air elegantly for days upon days. That's really how I felt. It was like so detailed. You're right, it's an acquired taste. Now, the movies I think are awesome. They found a way of removing some of that. But that's a hint I'm going to give you guys because I think great storytelling and business analysis is about less text. All right. And a way to revive our requirements. So, latest favorite, Hamilton. The Revolution story behind making the musical. Yeah, that's good. By the way, Nicole, did you know that Disney Plus, is bringing Hamilton the musical to Disney Plus on July 3rd? So if you guys don't have that, uh, what a great way to see the musical because obviously with the pandemic and everything, musicals are dropping by the wayside. In fact, Frozen, which was a great musical, uh, was canceled. They're not even going to continue on, even though it was making $1 million a week. Kind of crazy. Oh, wait, I don't want to go through that again. Wrong thief. There we go. So here's the thing. Your job is to become a business analyst storyteller. Yeah, I did a presentation about that, talking about the evolution of Hamilton and being a game changer. And Disney's carrying through with that, meeting with, Lin-Manuel Miranda and being a game changer and bringing a musical, the most successful musical, arguably, in history, financially, certainly, and not even worrying about their box office. They're bringing it to Disney Plus, which I think is phenomenal. So I love the idea of constantly being a game changer, but I want you guys to be storytellers. And you'll see in this picture that says storyteller, there is stories that are happening. There are lizards and people and pitchforks and giraffes and trees and mazes and everything else. And how we organize this is very important. When we don't organize it very well, your story's not going to work. So there are things that we need to consider with our story. Our stories need to have a lot of components, but more importantly, they need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And don't know where you're going to start, and I don't know where your middle is, and I don't know where your end is, but it doesn't mean it's always linear. It's not that the stories aren't there. We have tons of stories to tell. So many stories to tell. It's often that they're hard to tell well. It's kind of like when you see comedy and boy, the people really suck. Like, wow, you weren't even remotely funny. And I've had people tell me, oh, Bob's a comedian. He had a background as being a comedian. I'm like, no. And if I try to tell a legitimate joke outside of a children's joke, I can't tell it. I'm terrible at telling jokes. I can only relate to what's happening in the moment. And that's just being quick-witted. So if you guys give me something in chat, I might might ping it, like Lord of the Rings is an acquired taste. Oh, Rishi, that is so true. I don't even think herring. Um, I would eat herring over reading Lord of the Rings again. But it's someone's taste, and that's good. All right. So we have to figure out how to tell these stories. So if we go to the dictionary, the story definition of storytelling is the activity of telling or writing stories, the power of cinematic storytelling relating to the telling or writing of stories. I want you to really focus on that word relating. And it came up several times earlier. Relatability, relatability. How many times have you been in a requirements review or requirement session, elicitation session, and you've had people that did not even remotely relate to what was going on and they were disengaged? Be honest. I think in some organizations, it's a day-to-day basis, right? So the reason why we need to amp up and tell more stories is because we need to find a way of engaging these people because they're not engaged currently. So the better we can do this, the better off we'll be. So I want to make sure that what we're clear about here, yeah, especially when it revolves around data, right? A lot of people, they poo-poo the data thing. It's just the data, whatever. Oh my God, everything is about the data, folks. If it wasn't about the data, we wouldn't have so many people on television lying to us all the time. So let's not start with that. But requirement strategic storytelling is what I want to talk about. And it's not about crucial conversations or keynote presentations or all these other things. It's about our approach to how we tell a story in an effective manner. And I will demonstrate how I do that with requirements later this hour. And I'm betting a lot of people will say, you know what, I already do that, but I need to ramp it up, or I need to do it differently, or I need to figure out. And I'm going to give you some keys to my secret sauce on how that happens. All right. So you're the storyteller. I gave you a hint with it was evolving. And you've got to work with all these different people. And I don't know why the PO is so angry, product owner, the sponsor. They're very angry. But what is at the very forefront of good storytelling? What's the one thing that we have to provide for anything else to make sense? There's actually one of the words on the front last slide, context. Rishi got it, man. Right? PM is hungry for deadlines. I love it. Context. And the reason why most requirement sessions fail, the reason why most meetings fail, the reason why all projects fail is due to lack of context. So when I talk about storytelling, it's all about providing context. So for example, I have promised my sister-in-law that I would take her to Disney World. So last year my brother died and he never got to take her. She's turning 57. And so she spent her entire life without ever having that joy of going to Disney World. And she's the kind of person that will light up. She'll be crying on the boat going over to the castle. And so I'm providing context for you why I'm going to take her, because she deserves it. She's a good person. She has taken care of so many people, including her husband for many years while he was ill. And, so that's where you're trying to get to. Now, the thing about context is too much context is a bad thing. Not enough context is a bad thing. So we have to tell enough context to get the story started, right? That reason, so that we know where to take it. And now that we know why I'm dedicating this and I'm going to get her to Disney World, well, now it gets more complicated because now we live in a pandemic. And we don't want to bring anyone down with the pandemic, but these are things I have to think about, like what happens if, and what are we going to do, you know? And then we start going through all those other things. So, as a storyteller, first and foremost, here's what I want you guys to be always thinking about. What is the context that I need to present to people to get this story started? What is the context that is going to prime people so they will actually listen to what I have to say or facilitate them? You know, you're correct, Rishi. What's in it for me? The Whiffam factor. That's why we have to provide context, because we need to find a way of connecting to the Whiffam factor. And if we can't, then it doesn't matter. I will tell you that I have started sessions, and based on starting to tell the story in the context and getting into the Whiffam factors, I have actually canceled meetings because I knew it wasn't going to work. And people were okay with that. So, but this gets into preparation too, you know, and you got to tie all this stuff together. So more on that when we get there. So why do we really need to tell requirement stories versus just telling people here's a requirement? I'm telling you we need to be relatable and we need to create this, you know, intense experience. And I will say intense on some level. But why do we really need to tell stories, you guys? Paint a visual. I'm all about that 100% every day, Val. Get up on that whiteboard. Get up on that whiteboard and paint. Get up on that whiteboard and paint. I know there's a rap song there, or just a song in my head. All right. What else? Why do we need to tell requirement stories? Make them relatable. Excellent, Ross. Why else? So people will listen. People care. They understand. Remember the song Children Will Listen? If you haven't heard that song, it's awesome. Careful the things you do, children will listen. Careful the things you say, children, you know, you got to be careful. Um, Data points in logical order, right? There's nothing worse than hearing data points out of logical order. People's heads explode. It's like a South Park episode. Boom. Notice how what I did there? I created a visual with my hands if you were watching, and I said South Park, and I gave you the audio cue. So people that have seen South Park where the heads have exploded, you knew exactly what I was talking about. I'm going to give you little hints like that. And not everyone is a hand talker like I am, but I talk with my hands a lot. Why we're doing the requirement, putting the pieces together. Putting it together. I have a song for everything, by the way. Expectations, all right? So we're allowed to curse. What's the matter, you, uncle? No, we're not allowed to curse. This is keeping it safe for work. The closest we're going to get to cursing is the song Blame Canada, which I don't blame because I love my Canadian friends. But the song is hysterical. All my Canadian friends right now. If anyone's on from Canada, sorry about that. So some of the other reasons we need to tell stories could be, dun, 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 we tell stories. Thank you, Brock. We tell stories so that we can hit different styles: audio, visual, kinesthetic. All right. And the stories will help relate to people because some people will only listen, some people only see, some people have to be tactile. And by the way, there's more than that. There's Gartner's theory that also talks about mathematical and musical and spatial. And there's a lot of different styles that most of us have not been trained in. And those are things that we should address and look up. Because documents bore people. No one wants to sit there reading the 80-page document. That's so old school. It's not helpful. We have to find new ways of doing this. Scope, all right? The scope needs to be memorable because it's the context for what we're constantly doing. Good question. Kinesthetic is for the people that need touchy-feely. They have to be more physical. So sometimes we need them up at the whiteboard drawing with us, or I need to draw for them, or I need to give them a piece of paper to work with. Versus audio people just listen. Movement, yeah, it's that physicality. Thanks, Rishi. Versus the visual or the audio. Good questions. Don't ever let the webinar get in the way of asking a great question. All right, or a box. Because I realized I had one in the corner here and all my boxes on my screen are in the way and I can't read it. Oh, sign off. Yeah. Here's the thing. A lot of people don't sign off because they don't understand the story. I wouldn't. Inspiring people. This is one a lot of people don't think about. Why do I need to be inspired to care about the requirements? Because we are modern day third-party neutral change agents. The whole point of being an analyst is enabling change. So we must inspire people to greater heights, to something more exciting. And that can be difficult. Not everyone's on board with that, right? And, it's changing those behaviors. So those all work together. All right. So all requirements have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what's surprising about this is often I hear people say, well, then that's not true. That's not how it works. And I'm going to prove that out to you with some examples here real quickly. And I'm going to point out all of your modeling and all of your requirements have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then we'll get back to storytelling. Here's a classic functional requirement and a user story. The classic functional requirement has a beginning, a middle, and an end. All right, it's all there. We go from high level to detail. A user story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. As a I want so that. Requirements writing is set up. If you do requirements well, you have the beginning and the middle and the end. Question coming in. I don't know if you're going to cover this, Bob, but how do we get sign off after the story has been told if it's not documented? Let's bring that back up at the end real quick, and I will address that. I'm going to make a quick note. Doc, sign off. It's a good one to cover near the end there. All right. A SIPOC has a beginning, a middle, and end. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys, but you've got the starting point, the supplier and the input, the process at the middle, the output, and the consumer, the customer is the end. The same is true of a context diagram. They have beginnings and middle and ends that all work together. The same is true of process modeling. We have high-level process maps, level 1, level 2 is very, mid-road, that's the typical BA level, and the end, procedural level. So they just get more detailed as they go on. In fact, everything we do, swim lanes, beginning, middle, and end. Process maps. I'm not saying these are great examples of that. I'm just letting you know that they exist. I typically use these in classes and have students fix them, by the way. So this is not a pretty swim lane. Use case narratives. If you're doing use case modeling, and by the way, it's a myth to say there's no use case modeling in Agile. There's entire books out there on it. A lot of misinformation about how we tell stories. What do use cases do? They tell fantastic stories when they're written well. All right. Storyboards. Oh, my favorite. Any kind of storyboard I'm happy with, but they have a beginning and middle and an end, a starting, the meat, and this is how it finishes. Even your process models, guys, like DMAIC, Plan, Do, Check, Act, everything is built with a beginning, a middle, and an end in mind. Not to say it has to end. It is, in fact, iterative, but it's there to guide us. So what's interesting is that all of the models and everything we've learned throughout our career have, in fact, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, then why the heck are they so hard to communicate? Why are requirements hard to communicate to people? Just like Rishi's comment, like, how do we get sign off if we're not going to give them physical stuff? And I'm not asking rhetorically here. Weigh in on the chat box if you have an idea. They can be theoretical, right? Terminology is inconsistent or different. They're boring. Words are hard. Words are hard. That's why we talk about documenting in 5th grade language. so that everyone can understand. And I knew third grade was making a comeback with a lot of people out there. And in the class, someone said, I heard third grade. And I was like, oh, not third grade language. Can we at least keep it at a fifth grade level? People don't like to read. They just want to scan and skim, you know, it's so true. You know, they literally. So now that's a really good time to tell a story. I was doing some requirements for the IIBA local chapter, and I was working with someone who was in charge of doing that. And I thought, you know what, I'll be really nice. I'll make these double spaced, a little larger, because, you know, I know they wear glasses. And it was just 2 pages, a piece of paper, really easy. And nothing was done with the requirements. By the way, someone on the call right now is cringing because they know who it is and they know who they are. And I finally went over and I said, what's going on with the requirements? And they were like, these? And I said, yes. And then they basically tossed on the desk and said, I don't value reading. Oh, what do you, oh, that was a 2-hour argument. I'm not going to finish that story. We're just going to leave it there. It was a great moment in our careers to have that argument. So a lot of people don't value the reading. They want models. They want stories to be told differently. We had other comments coming in here. Can't imagine the current state. Not everyone agrees on what they are. Different audiences. People don't want to think. Too many assumptions. I'm a huge proponent of removing all assumptions. I don't like them. Hard to visualize. If there's no user interfaces present, everything's behind the scene. Yeah, it makes it harder. You can always tell that people have not read or reviewed the requirements because they ask questions that are answered in the requirements. That's correct. And you got multiple people involved. Some only focus on their requirements and tune out on others, which is why visual and storytelling will help get us over that, you guys. And we need to think about how we progress through that. Here's the reality. We're always going to have good and bad people, good and bad stories, good and bad requirements, good and bad storytellers. And that shouldn't stop us from trying to be a good storyteller, because it will help us overcome poor requirements, poor stories, and bad people, difficult people. Stories matter if they're told well. If you're the storyteller that doesn't know how to shut up, then we're going to have a problem. If you're the storyteller that goes into too much detail for a person that wanted the high-level story, you got a problem. So being a good storyteller is still about analyzing people, though, but the more you tell stories, the better you get at it, the more you'll get out of it. So, all right. So having said that, I want to address people a little bit. And the reality is, difficult people are going to be there. People make assumptions. They don't value reading. These are things that all came up. I didn't predict what you were going to say, or did I? Because you've already mentioned both of those. Perception is reality. SMEs sometimes think they know better and don't care. They jump to solutions. These are all things we know, right? So what we need to do is create stories that stop this train of thought. And it's going to start with that context. And we need lots of context. So to be clear, we need to immerse our audience. We need to tell a personal story, which I just did. But we need to tell these things in a way that allows them to come back to the table and be immersed in it and care and get off their damn phone and not be doing this while you're telling the story. If we tell a good story, they'll stop that, they'll put it down. And that means we need to bring things to life. We show, we don't tell, we get up on whiteboards, we do things, or we create other environments that catches their eye. A long, long time ago. How many people know what that song is just with that phrase? American Pie, yes. And most people will be engaged, especially if you love that song. Weird Al, the saga begins. Props, Brock. That was just like awesome. Um, and the whole thing about it is you're building to what's called a star moment, something they always remember, and with a positive takeaway. This here Anakin guy. And so I'm asking a lot with this, and we need more information on how to do this, and that's where we're going to go in here in just a little bit. So, in order for you to tell a good story, you need to make sure you have all of these things in your back pocket: facts, roles, rationale, speaking equally. Everyone is equal. I am no more qualified to be up here than anyone else out there. In fact, Rishi's come up with two great comments already. Rishi, you're going to take over. Just do the rest of it. You good for that, Rishi? You want to take over? Yes, we will absolutely. You sing better than me. I'm shy. Well, those are things we're going to have to get over if we're going to be a good storyteller. Yes, we will share the slide deck that will go out. It'll be placed out on website somewhere. Got to create a safe environment, right? You got to allow people to speak up. You got to create this relatability. A lot of people don't do that. And that's a big, huge problem. And it's one thing that I pride myself on, and maybe it's my experience with doing lots of focus groups in my life, but it's about creating environments where anyone can, share. Because we only get better when we all share. Share. I'm share. Thanks, Paul. That's always my goal with my sessions and my meetings. This is your safe place. Yes, exactly. And by creating that safe place, it will allow you to tell stories where people will also tell stories. Okay. Common sense. Now, that's a hard one because not all of us have common sense, but do your best with that. That's all I'm going to say. In fact, there are a number of people today that are a part of this experience that do not have common sense. They will not admit to it. They don't even know they don't have it. But some people are just much more logically oriented and don't have that connection to common sense. So if you know you're not a person that's very common sense oriented and you're very logical, then maybe you just need to get the logic of the story in place and test the waters out. Oh, everyone thinks they have common sense. It's just not true. I agree. And then keep it moving, right? Which is what I'm trying to do with some of these slides. Keep them moving. We got stuff we got to get to. All right. So here's a story. A functional requirement, a swim lane, and a data model walk into an IT department. The functional requirement says to the swim lane, and the data model just laughed and laughed and laughed. Um, I don't actually have a joke around that because I don't tell jokes unless it's, basic kids jokes. Um, but this is kind of what you're trying to set up to do, right? And I know everyone wants to say, no, I really want to know a functional requirement, a swim lane, and data model walk into an ID department. Where's that going? Because it's catchy. Like, why would those three things be there? But that's your job to start connecting them. All right. And sometimes they don't make sense. And if they don't make sense, then you got to tell them in a different way. So here's where I'm going to start getting into this. And we've mentioned a little bit, but now I'm going to go a level deeper. The beginning is all about the context, the characters, the setting, the problem. Weird equals memorable? I think so. Right? I think so, very much so. I mean, does anyone actually look at me? And for the people that have seen me live and in person doing my crazy keynotes, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people think I am weird. I know a lot of people know I'm a big nerd. I've had blue hair, I've had pink hair, I've had red hair, well, very kind, thank you. No, I know you didn't mean me, but my point is I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being weird because much to Kit's point, it keeps it interesting. Yeah, it talks about the joke. But it's the same thing I do as a real person. I am not afraid to show off my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. See, I can't even say it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt. Yeah, my t-shirt almost went up all the way. That was going to be crazy. And got excited. Bob the BA. Yeah, Bob the BA. So what's really interesting about Bob the BA, and I'm going to just go into a story here so that everyone can relate. When we were looking at the name Bob the BA, I was looking at relatability and affinity and likeness. And there's one major connection. What's the major connection that Bob the BA sounds like? Bob the Builder, exactly. And it was reinforced by me with a couple of god nieces that we have. And they, we were talking about the name, and they sent me a voicemail. And they were, like 4 and 8 at the time or something like that. And all of a sudden I hear this voicemail. Bob the Builder, can he build it? Bob the Builder, yes, he can. It was, yeah, and it was, yes, correct. They call me Uncle Marshmallow. And they sang me the Bob the Builder song, and it reinforced like this is the right name because people will get it. There's a strong affinity, right? There's a strong relationship. So maybe that just means more to me than anyone else I told the story to, but I think you get the point. You need to make these things memorable. Alliteration, yeah, that's the word I was really looking for, Rishi, and it did not come out of my mouth. Rishi, you're like my biggest fan today. You're coming up with all sorts of things. Rishi's on fire. All right, so the beginning is all about your characters and setting the problem. And I'm going to do a demo of this in just a few minutes. It's the context. The middle is the stakes, the capability, the inspiration. The end is crisis, climax, and outcomes. And I think we all inherently know this, but often a lot of us don't prepare to talk about this stuff. And we need to figure out how to get more of this into our requirement stories so that, in fact, people understand. Another way of saying that is simply context, engagement, and accountability. I live off of these things. Context for breakfast, context for lunch, context for dinner. Whenever I can give you context, and if I don't give you context, I teach people to come back at me and share with the engagement, saying it's okay to say in a chat box, this is not a one-way ordeal. I don't have to just be lecturing. I want feedback. And then they ask me questions so I can give them more context. So 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 1. Then we get to 3, which is accountability, which could go back to context and engagement. And I keep cycling through, and my stories are always revolving around this. And by the way, if you don't do 3, then everything failed. Because that just means, yeah, rah, rah, that was great to hear. But I need to make people accountable. I need to hold them to it. That's a hard thing. That's why we need to go back to that sign-off question later. So, context in storytelling for the business analyst is all about the inquiry model. And most of you know this already. It's who, what, where, why, when, how many. These are the 7 fundamental questions that if you don't ask about data, your requirements fail. If you don't ask about process, they fail. If you don't ask about any modeling you do, your requirements will fail. So we need to start talking about that. And we're going to break it up, but these things start. So some of the things in context are more who related, and then we move on to other pieces, but we'll come back to more context that adds layers. It's always about adding layers with these 7 dynamics, the inquiry model, right? When we get out of that in the engagement, those things will escalate and we will start talking about in-depth details, how things work, where it comes from, how we manage the risk around it. It's all of that stuff that has to be in the middle, all right? And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I think you guys know about this. And then at the end, it's that responsibility for the quality, okay? So all of that aside, see how this keep going. If you tell your story right, then these things will happen. Questions get answered, people do their jobs better, they collaborate, don't compromise, people care, they solve problems, we've got perspectives, we've challenged beliefs, we look at unproductive behaviors and we change them to productive behaviors. That's what that does. And so I'm going to go back to Hotel California. Why was that song so effective? Because even with a story that was kind of weird, people cared about it. People wanted to know how it ended. people wanted to hear more details. They were like, where is it going? How can it challenge me to do something different? All right. And it's a beautiful song because of that. Not only was it a great tune, but the lyrics, man, sold it. Okay, so will this be available as a recording afterwards so I can catch up or refer back to it? We have been recording to it, so I believe so, but I'm going to leave that to Paul to explain, and he will come back as Jen. Yes, the recording is available. Rishi, does everyone in the meeting have to be accountable for something or the other? I have people often from the informed category. No, not everyone has to be accountable, but you need to analyze who needs to be accountable based on the story you're telling, right? Because the only way to complete the story is for them to agree to the story and become accountable. So just make sure you're connecting those parts, and then you will have a complete story. All right. So quick thing on techniques, and then we're going to do a quick demo and then leave it to questions for a few minutes. There are basic soft skills that you guys mostly know already. All right. Whoops, sorry, went too far. Edit. But these are the ones that I have spent most of my career trying to master. Listening in and not forming opinions when people are talking. I need to listen to everything they say. And the number of times that I argue, and it works in business, but when you're dealing with family, it's out the door. Just letting you know. But paraphrasing, giving subsets back, mirroring body language, mirroring tone, mirroring text. Priming is all about context, and storyboarding. To me, those are the fundamentals for storytelling and requirements. And they do take a lifetime to master. It takes a lot of work to consistently learn how to do those things. So don't be afraid if things aren't going the way you want. You just have to go back and analyze which piece did I not tell well. All right. And for the people that say they're shy or uncomfortable or they get nervous in front of people, why? Because I'm talking about you. In order to tell a story, you need to be sitting right where I'm sitting. So why is it so hard? I get excited when the light bulb comes on for me and I share the excitement. So maybe you get overexcited. Val, do you go into, oh, you know, because that's why some people freak out about storytelling. They go over the boat. I know you're not that type, Val, but unsure of the facts, afraid of making a mistake. I know the system better than my stakeholders. Oh, so we've got a lot of good things going on here. If you're unsure of the facts, then prime them. Say, you know what? We don't have all the facts yet. I wish that was said on TV a lot more, especially in a pandemic. I wish that people would own up to the fact that they don't have all the facts, because facts are everything. So own up to it with priming, context, and honestly, people will be more accepting of it. We are working towards achieving exactly what the facts are. Afraid of making a mistake, then prime people that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from that. Fail fast, fail safe. You know what? We're going to be in here. I might not say everything I need to today. You guys are going to help me. We might fail a little. We're going to succeed a little. It's okay. You have to educate people why it's okay to make mistakes, because we're learning together. All right. Knowing your system better than your stakeholders to tell a story, you have to tell it in a way that's not condescending. You must actually tell your story and pull information out of them at the same time. Hey, I was thinking that in this situation, as I'm providing context, Marge, I'm going to use Marge and Homer. And Homer, we'd like you to add your flavor here. And then when they give you something that you know is incorrect because you know the system better than they do, you ask respectful questions. Does that always happen? Where? How? Just don't say why, because usually they feel attacked. And so you can actually tell stories through people by getting them to offer up information they didn't know they were going to offer up. By the way, that's my favorite storytelling because people bond over it. Grammatical mistakes. You know what? Prime people. why you might make a grammatical mistake. I'm verbally dyslexic. I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet today. Some days are better than others, but I will put the emphasis on the wrong syllable or I mix things up. I did have it earlier today where I put two words together that made no sense. So, like, scared an audience would be Scottians. What's a Scottians? Oh, I don't know. Scaredens. Um, yeah, the best lesson I learned was fake the confidence till you make it. And you don't even have to do that. You just have to embrace that you will, right? And bring people along for the ride. So we also have resistance. How do you control others who are condescending and sometimes destroy your credibility? Well, that's a whole nother class. That's how to deal with difficult people, which is in June or July. And it's on sale for $100. It's a very valid question, but I mean that my answer would take up many, 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 many minutes. Um, and if you really need information on that, you can reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to help with you. Toughest stakeholders are lawyers and nurse case managers. They just keep saying, I'm not tech savvy, so we keep trying to use pictures. That's a great reason. When people aren't, use the picture. Right? Trying to tell past context based on previous assumptions, interpretations of past clients, when new sign-off group has a very different basis of their interpretations of the same process. These things can be hard, but already signed up for two others. Good. But the difficult people one is by the way, it's my favorite class to teach. It actually, for several clients, has been their favorite class. It's therapy. I'm just letting you know. Okay. So moving on, all good, but we do have running out of time here. And I need to get into a demo and I need to get into a concept and do a few little questions. So pictures have been around, you guys, 40,000 years. And people are still interpreting what these cave drawings look like. But they were there and they tell 1,000 words and it was a great way of communicating. And that's what I want you guys to do. So I am so big on storyboards in business analysis. I can't tell you. I find it's coming into its own. User-centered design practices are becoming all the rage, which is more storyboards and designing the same time and requirements. A lot of you, your careers are going to morph into this. So if you haven't been doing storyboards and pictures, start practicing. One of my most successful versions was taking a PowerPoint document and I created a 50-page PowerPoint, but I layered it with multiple layers of images. And when I was done, I hyperlinked everything so it looked like data was running through the PowerPoint. I didn't have a fancy prototyping tool. This was many years ago when PowerPoint first came out, but I created it and people thought it was a legit system. It was really cool and it got the point across. And senior manager was like, absolutely, this is the way we should do all requirements. And I was like, no, not all, just this one, because this one was very user experience based. But the point is it got the point across and they bought off on it. Comment, I'm not even sure where to begin to do storyboards. Is this a future webinar you will be hosting? It won't be in a webinar. It will be in classes that we do. And we have other things coming up that you'd be able to access something to that, but I'm not really ready to tell you that story yet. But typically that's a class-based thing. But lots of pictures. You're welcome. Lots and lots of pictures. All right. So I put in here a thing about the Harvard Gardner theory of multiple intelligences that goes past audio, kinesthetic, visual. And I'll let you guys read up on that on your own. We're not covering that, but I just wanted this in here because you need to reach out to more than the audio, visual, and kinesthetic. So that's your homework, okay? So this is how most people tell a requirement story, and they basically tell the requirement, maybe a process model, some data, and they wrap it up in a Word document. No one reads it, no one tells it. I'm going to do it a little differently, okay? So assuming this is my story. Okay, so I'm going to go through, yes, my view. That's a good question. I am not sure. lot of these webinars we're redoing because we don't always have recordings of everything. So, but here's an example of how I tell a story. And I'm going to go straight from priming through and give you guys a good idea of what makes sense. So, hey everyone, welcome to our workshop. I just want to remember everyone why we're here. We're here today to make sure that customer service knows that we are working hard to make their job easier. Our company depends on great customer service. And so I want to give a shout out to all of our customer service agents across the world that are working tirelessly to do this. And we're going to overhaul their system, and we are going to make their jobs easier. Now, we've had some problems in making their jobs easier because we've been dealing with PHI problems. Now, for those of you who don't know what PHI is, there's two kinds. There's protected health information and personal health information. And the protected health information cannot be seen, and it has made it difficult for us to determine when data changes can be made. Well, we have solved that problem, and we are going into a partnership with Correctlo, and we are doing a purchase of their company and migrating them into our systems. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because they have experience in dealing with PHI, and they're able to make enhancements to their systems without the problems that we've encountered with the constraints around protected health information. And so their system has a unique way of storing the data off on the side while you're making the changes, and it comes back. It's really exciting. And I'm going to let you know right now, I don't understand how it all works, but that's what we're going to grow and do this together so that we can, again, make sure that we're focusing on our customer service people. Now, as I'm going through this story, you guys are probably thinking, wow, Bob, this is really rah, rah. Bob's really excited about this. And I am, because I am a change agent. And I will continue on. And the first part that we're going to focus on in this workshop is targeting the change to the member profile search, which we know everyone here has experience in. And I'm going to continue this story. At a base level, this is kind of how I approach things. I have a script that I've defined in my head of how I want to tell it. And I tell it because I have visual aids that will allow me to go with that. All right. So it's really important to think about these things. And you notice I'm incorporating the who and the why and the what as I go. Now, here's the key, guys. As you do more of this and the storytelling, you have to bring in supporting stories. And when I'm in my target member search, I'm probably going to bring in some kind of storyboard to show the picture, or I'm going to bring in a use case, a scenario to show people. If I was going back to the Correctlo thing, which I find is very hard to say, but I had to find a name of a company that did not exist. You know, I might bring back in the business case and go into that, but that was not the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting was to focus on that PHI and that target member search. Here's the thing, if you spend a little more time at the beginning, it's okay to let it go a little longer, all right? And then when I'm doing this, I am creating visuals, and I will show them context diagrams or functional decomps or mock-ups or pretty much whatever I need to, storyboards and scenarios. I always have a visual as I'm talking. Now, I know some of you already do this, but have you told the story effectively enough is the question. And this is where my obsession is coming in, is always constantly telling the story. Here's the customer story. This is why we're doing this. This is what our company needs. We're struggling with PHI. We're doing this. But doing it with the visuals at the same time is what is really going to catch on to people. Does this make sense to everyone? Now, one person, okay, a few people, chat's coming in. For the people that you understand this, what are your concerns about storytelling? Time consuming. That is usually the first thing that people come up with, the time to produce or create. Here's the interesting thing. and I jumped the screens here and I shouldn't have. By the way, agile, waterfall, incremental, whatever, there's no difference. The stories are the stories. In fact, I will argue if you're agile, you need more stories. All right. So having the right visual aid when I need it. All right. I agree. All of those things can be time consuming. But how much time do you save by having it? I do like that comment. Stakeholders seem to think it's obvious only after they've seen the visual. You know, new to the company and the team, that makes it harder. You're going to have to become an expert. You got to learn all that stuff before you can get there. The thing about it, the visuals and the story, you're correct, Val. It stays with them longer, and it may require you to do an extra hour of work here or there, but it just saved everyone else several hours. Yeah, Rishi, it saves a ton of time later. Do people listen or read? Depends. Some listen, some read, some do both. If you can get everyone time savings, they are going to go out of their way to help you in other areas that you have not considered. If you can get everyone time savings and make your meeting shorter, more concise, more important, well, then you're saving yourself time as well. So, what I will suggest, and I recommend because this has always been my approach, and it made me a much more successful analyst after I started doing this. I sacrificed on one big project in the short term of my life to start looking at how to get ahead of myself. And that was by getting these things created. Um, so what do you do if you're new to the company and don't have a mentor? I feel like I don't know things. Um, One, you got to try and get a mentor. Two, you at least need a coach. And so there's different things like coaching on analysis is one thing, which we can handle. We have our great coaching program that's ridiculously cheap, like $100 for the entire year, and you get emails to us and 4 hours a week with us. Um, but internally, you need to find something that's willing to spend that time, and that's a whole relationship thing you've got to do. All right. Social distancing challenge, trying to sell a story via pre-recorded video demos without having a live audience. That is a challenge. But how do you build the context into that? Prime people, give them context, add a section. Hey, this section's coming up, and you may have certain questions of it, and I want you to send those questions in to me at list the email. You know, and Val's correct. Don't be afraid to say you don't know if you don't know. You can only play the new card usually for a couple of months. Um, but I often tell people, look, I'm going to tell some stories and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. And I want you to tell some stories and ask a lot of questions because the more stories and questions we tell and ask, the better we get at this. And it's going to save us a lot of time later. And I'm going to build exactly what you need then. Work with me. Right?
Okay, Bob, we are at the end of our session today. It is 30 minutes after the hour. We just wanted to let folks know that Bob's got a few more things he wants to talk about, and we're still going to stay around for more questions and all of the good stuff. So if you can stick with us, we'd greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, just to let you know, before you do depart, we'll give you an email with the webinar recording and the PowerPoint deck. We'll show you how to get that downloaded for you as well. If you do need to leave, no worries. We'll get that to you as well, but we hope you stick around. Back to Bob.
I told my team I would be probably 5 minutes late, so I got about 5 minutes here. The final tips are on here is, listed on the screen. You're welcome. But does anyone have any specific, as I go off screen here, pick something up? Does anyone have any questions, burning questions? Manager's unavailable. The team is my manager and I. Oh. So when you're on a small thing like that, you're going to have a crucial conversation to talk about what you need to do, given your team is so small, and how they can help you. Because if they hired you with the idea that you can do everything right off the bat, that was a mistake, because there's no way you can know institutional knowledge from people internally if you've never been in that company before. It takes time. If they hired you as an analyst with a certain level of skills, that's another thing. I struggle to wrap up the story with the recommended actions. So your stories wrap up based off of the overall goals that you set for the story or the meeting or the product or the overall goals that the people have said. So you need to go back to, why are we even doing this? You know, and recapping the story is kind of like, just to make sure you guys understand, we met today because we wanted to address this member screen for this migration effort of Curriculo dealing with PHI. And as we discovered through this process, we realized A, B, and C. A needs to be assigned to Marge, B is assigned to Homer, C is unknown. I will take that and I will find out more. And we're going to recap this in an email for those of you that want to read the recap. And we're also going to schedule a future meeting, which should come out on your calendar in the next couple of days. So this is all just about going through those motions. Thank you, Bob. Just want to add, remember that your customer stakeholders are probably as uneasy as you about the current situation. Time to be more, empathetic. Yes, please. Empathy is everything to me. And that's what, helps with the relatability and all that stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, who doesn't want to be the Harry Potter story of business analysis? Right? Flexibility, everything else. This went way too fast. It was like the fastest hour ever. So here's the deal. Thank you guys. Appreciate the comments. And everyone, I know everyone's got meetings, so tell Waylon his mom said hi. No, don't do that. He would be mortified. He's doing really well, by the way, and he's a trivia whiz. Yeah. Crazy. All right, you guys, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to chat with us. Please try to think about how you tell stories better. Just any little thing you can do in that area will make you a better business analyst, I guarantee it. It certainly has helped my career a ton. So much success to all of you, and be well, be safe, and do all those things that we need to do. Welcome, all right, everybody. To Hotel California. Now I got to sing my way out, Paul. Such a lovely place. Bye, everyone.
All right, guys, thank you so much for attending today. All of us here at the Uncommon League would like to extend our personal thanks for your attending today's webinar. We greatly appreciate that. Well, we'll send you an email with a link to downloading the recording and the PowerPoint presentation that Bob has provided for you here today. We hope that you will join us again next month for another session of Webinar Wednesday. Sign up for that. It's coming out real soon. You'll see that in our newsletter. This is Paul Crosby, and I am going to say, have an awesome day.